Level 1. The Magazine Dreamer. You're 11 years old, and the magazine is 3 years out of date. A copy of a fishing publication your uncle left on the porch that's been sitting under your bed ever since. Page 47 has a photograph that you've looked at so many times, the paper has gone soft at the corner. A man in the Amazon jungle is holding a peacock bass the size of a car tire, its flanks the color of gold and gunmetal, its mouth still open from the fight. The caption says 9 kilos. You don't fully know what a kilo is, you know it's big. Your bedroom wall has 3 posters, and one of them, taped up crooked, is a printed copy of that same photograph. Every weekend, your dad drives you to the pond 2 blocks from your house, the one with the bluegill and the occasional bass that everyone in the neighborhood has already caught twice. You used to love that pond. You caught your first fish there, a 6-inch sunfish that felt enormous in your 8-year-old hands. Now you stand at the edge of the water with your rod in your hand and the pond just looks small. It looks like a bathtub. Somewhere on the other side of the planet, there's a river so wide you can't see the far bank, with fish in it that could pull you off a dock, and you're standing here catching bluegill that fit in your palm. You don't say this out loud because it sounds ungrateful, but it's the only thing you think about. You start checking out library books about the Amazon instead of the ones assigned for school. You learn the word piranha before you learn long division. You draw the river on the back of your homework, a blue line snaking through a green mess of pencil scribbles meant to be trees. Your teacher asks what you're drawing. You tell her it's where you're going to go fishing someday. She smiles the way adults smile at things they don't think will happen. You don't argue with her. You just fold the drawing up and put it in the same drawer as the magazine. At night, you read the caption under that photograph so many times you have it memorized without meaning to. A short paragraph about a river system so vast it holds more fresh water than every other river on Earth combined, and a fish inside it strong enough to snap a rod that any bass angler back home would call unbreakable. You don't know yet that the trip is 9 years away. You just know the pond isn't enough anymore, and it never will be again. Level 2. The Gear-Obsessed Angler. You're 15 now, and you have a part-time job bagging groceries 3 nights a week, and every dollar of it disappears into fishing gear you don't need yet for water you haven't seen. You buy 50-pound braided line for a local lake that has never in its history held a fish that could break 12-pound test. The guy at the tackle shop asks what you're targeting. You tell him peacock bass in Blackwater rivers in Brazil. He looks at you like you just told him you're training for the Olympics using a treadmill in your garage, which, in a way, you are. You buy topwater propeller lures the size of your forearm, heavy wooden things designed to churn a wake that a 9-kilo predator can hear from 30 feet away. You cast them into a lake that tops out at largemouth bass and occasional confused catfish. Your arm learns the motion anyway. Big, violent sidearm casts that send the lure 50 yards instead of the gentle lobs everyone else on the dock is using. People stare. You don't care. You're not practicing for this lake. You're practicing for a river that exists only in videos you watch until 2 in the morning. Grainy footage of boats crawling along water the color of strong tea, guides shouting in Portuguese you don't understand yet, but can feel the excitement of anyway. You fall asleep with your phone still playing, the sound of an outboard motor and someone yelling "Aqui, aqui" as the last thing you hear. Your parents think it's a phase. Your dad, to his credit, starts watching a few of the videos with you, mostly to see what's eating up all your paychecks. He doesn't say it's a phase, he just asks how much it costs to actually go there. You don't have an answer yet. You start looking it up that night. Also, do yourself a favor and hit subscribe. Because looking at that price tag for the first time, was a serious reality check. Level 3. The Passport and Vaccine Grind. You're 19, and the number you've written on a sticky note above your desk is $3,500. That's the flight, the lodge, the guide fees, the gear you still need, and a buffer for whatever you haven't thought of. You pick up every overtime shift the warehouse will give you, unloading trucks at 5 in the morning before class, restocking pallets until your shoulders ache in a way that no gym workout has ever matched. Every extra shift gets logged in a notebook next to a running total that climbs slower than you'd like. You get your passport, your first one, and you stare at the blank pages for a long time before you close it. You go to a travel clinic for the yellow fever vaccine because every guide service you've emailed says it's non-negotiable for that part of the country. The nurse asks if you're nervous about the shot. You tell her you're not nervous about the shot, you're nervous about everything after it. You buy a travel rod case that's too long for your closet and has to live under your bed at an angle. You spend nights refreshing a hydrology website that tracks the river's water level in a country you've never set foot in, learning the difference between Chea, the flood season when the water swallows the forest floor, and Vazante, the dry season when the river pulls back and concentrates the fish into channels you can actually find. You don't speak Portuguese yet, but you know that word, Vazante, better than some English words you use every day. Your coworkers at the warehouse ask what you're saving for, and when you tell them, half of them assume you mean a fishing trip to Florida or the Gulf, and you have to explain that no, it's a river you'll need 3 flights and a boat to reach. Some of them laugh. One of them, an older guy named Marcus who's worked the loading dock for 11 years, doesn't laugh at all. He tells you that most people spend their whole lives talking about the one thing they actually want to do and never do the math on how to get there. You think about that more than you expected to. The total in the notebook finally crosses $3,500 on a Tuesday night in October. You don't celebrate. You just book the flight before you can talk yourself out of it. Level 4, the flight and culture prep. You're on a 10-hour flight south with a language app open on your phone trying to cram a working vocabulary into your skull somewhere over the Caribbean. You've learned how to say hello, thank you, and where is the bathroom, in that order of importance. You're far more worried about the rod tube stuffed into the overhead bin than you are about your own luggage, and you check on it every time someone walks past it like you're guarding a coffin. The man in the seat next to you is older, maybe 70, with the kind of tan that comes from decades outdoors rather than a vacation. He notices you checking the overhead bin for the 4th time and laughs. A real laugh, not a polite one. He asks in English rough enough that you have to lean in to catch it. You go to Manaus? You are not ready for the heat, my friend. You ask him how he knows. He points at your shirt, a fishing brand logo you didn't think anyone outside your hometown would recognize, and then at your hands, pale and soft in a way that his clearly are not anymore. He tells you a story about his first trip decades ago, how he lost 12 pounds in 10 days and gained something he still can't fully explain. You ask him if it was worth it. He doesn't answer with words. He just smiles and looks out the window at the clouds. And something about that non-answer scares you more than any warning could have. Level 5, the culture shock arrival. The doors of the plane open in Manaus, and the humidity hits you like a warm, wet towel pressed straight against your face, a wall of jungle air so thick it feels like a physical object you have to push through to get down the stairs. 98% humidity, the app on your phone says, and you didn't know a number could feel like a slap. Inside the terminal, a man you've never met wraps you in a full hug and slaps your back twice, like your old friends reunited after years apart. And it takes you a second to realize this is just how people greet each other here. Warmth handed out freely to strangers in a way your hometown never taught you to expect. Someone hands you a cold guaraná while your bags are loaded onto a wooden boat. The soda's sweeter and stranger than anything you've had, and you drink it in 3 long pulls because your body doesn't know yet how badly it needs the sugar and the cold. That night, you try to sleep in a hammock strung between 2 posts on the boat deck for the first time in your life, and your body doesn't understand the physics of it. You keep sliding toward the middle and waking up folded like a taco, laughing at yourself in the dark because there's nothing else to do about it. At lunch on the second day, someone passes you a small bowl of red sauce that looks exactly like the ketchup you grew up putting on everything, and you spoon a generous helping onto your rice without asking a single question. Your mouth is on fire within 4 seconds. Your eyes water. The whole boat crew watches you reach for water, which does nothing, and then for a piece of bread, which does something, and they laugh so hard one of them has to sit down. You're laughing too, eventually, once your tongue stops burning, because you understand now that you didn't just fly to a different country, You flew into a completely different set of rules for what's normal, and you're going to spend the rest of this trip learning them one embarrassment at a time. Level 6. The Blackwater Tucunaré Hunter. 3 days in, and you're standing in a narrow aluminum boat on the Rio Negro, water so dark and tannin-stained it looks like brewed coffee, black enough that your reflection disappears just a foot below the surface. Your guide is a riverside local named Edmilson, who has fished these channels since before he could read, and he doesn't say much. He just points at a cut in the flooded forest where the shadows sit heavy under half-submerged trees, and nods once. You cast the propeller lure you trained with for 2 years on a lake that never deserved it, and it lands exactly where he pointed, and you start the retrieve, the blades churning awake in a sputtering, chugging sound across the black water. The strike doesn't build, it detonates. Your water explodes upward in a column, the reel screams, and something on the other end nearly rips the rod straight out of your hands before your forearms even understand what's happening. Edmilson is yelling something in Portuguese that you don't need translated. The tone alone tells you everything, and you hang on, while a peacock bass that will later weigh in at 9 kilograms takes you on a run toward a submerged log that could end this fight in half a second if it reaches it. You turn its head at the last possible moment. You don't know how. Your arms are already burning, and 5 minutes later, Edmilson lifts it into the boat with both hands. Gold and black and heaving, exactly the color from the magazine page that's been sitting under your bed for 8 years. Your arms are locked and shaking. You can barely lift them to hold the fish for the photo. It's the best pain you've ever felt in your life. Edmilson measures it without being asked, calls out the length in centimeters, and does a quick practiced calculation in his head before giving you the weight in kilos. 9. The exact number from a photograph you first saw when you were 11 years old, sitting on the floor of your bedroom. You don't tell him that. You just nod like it's a normal number to hear, even though your chest feels like it might come apart. He releases the fish back into the black water with both hands. Gently, the way you release something you respect rather than something you conquered, and it disappears into the tannin-dark current in less than a second. Gone like it was never there at all. Level 7. The Deep Channel River Monster. 2 weeks in, and the trip has shifted from surface violence to something slower and heavier. You're anchored over a 30-meter channel of mud and current, where the boat crew has been quietly obsessed with one fish for years. A catfish they call the piraiba, the ghost of the river. A species that can grow past 100 kilograms and disappear for seasons at a time before someone hooks one again. You're bottom fishing now. Heavy tackle, a bait the size of a small fish sitting on the riverbed 30 meters down. And you wait under a sun so direct of the equator that your guide reapplies sunscreen to the back of your neck without asking, because he's watched enough tourists burn to a blister to know it's coming. The rod tip barely moves at first, just a heavy, deliberate pull, nothing like the explosive strike from the Blackwater days. Then it bends double and stays there. 2 hours. That's how long the fight lasts. You're back against the boat's gunwale, the line grinding out and coming back in, stubborn, grudging feet, your hands cramping around the reel handle while the entire crew stops what they're doing to watch. Nobody talks about anything else. At one point, you think you've lost it. The line goes slack for 3 full seconds, and your stomach drops, and then it surges again, and everyone exhales at once. When the piraiba finally comes boatside, gray and enormous and older than you are, the whole crew goes quiet in a way that feels more respectful than any cheering could have been. Edmilson looks at you differently after that fish. Not like a tourist anymore, like someone who paid the price the river asks for. Your hands are raw from the reel handle, 2 blisters already forming under calluses you didn't have 2 weeks ago, and your back will ache for 3 days after this. But none of that registers yet. The crew takes photos, quick and careful, and then eases the giant catfish back over the gunwale and holds it upright in the current until it finds its own strength again and slides down into the brown water without a splash. The same quiet way it must have disappeared for whichever season it was hiding before this one. Nobody says much on the ride back to camp. There isn't much left to say. 2 hours against something that old rearranges what you think you're capable of, and you spend the whole trip back just staring at your own hands like they belong to someone else now. Level 8. The Amazon Legend and Return. You're older now, decades of trips stacked behind you, and you organize groups yourself twice a year. Flying gringos out of Manaus who look exactly like you did on that first flight, nervous, sunburned before they've even landed, guarding their rod tubes like coffins. You know the guides by name now. You know which channels hold fish in Vazante and which ones drown useless in Chea. You've stopped needing the app to say thank you. Back home, between trips, you work part-time at a small tackle shop off a highway in Florida, mostly because you like being near the gear, even when you're not using it. One slow afternoon, a kid, maybe 11, is standing at the magazine rack near the register, holding an old fishing publication open to a photograph of a river you'd recognize with your eyes closed. A jungle backdrop, a fish too big for the frame. You watch him for a moment before you walk over. You don't say much, just enough. You hand him a topwater propeller lure off the wall, heavy and absurd for anything in his local pond, and tell him to hang on to it for later. He asks later for what. You tell him he'll figure that out. He puts the lure in his pocket like it's something fragile, and he's still staring at the magazine page when you walk away. And somewhere behind you, a bell rings on the shop door as someone else walks in. And the whole thing starts over exactly the way it started for you. One crooked photograph and one river that refuses to let go of anyone who's ever seen it up close.